Marvel Rivals has had a sizable character roster since the game's launch, but certain characters are more overlooked than others. I'll be ranking the most overrated characters, starting with Bucky. Winter Soldier seems to be a lethal asset on the battlefield, being to the teeth armed and ready to fight. But beneath the cold exterior and cybernetic arm is one of the most overrated Marvel Rivals heroes, and not because he is not powerful, but because the work involved in making him useful simply isn't worth the payoff. Let's start with the most significant issue. He only has 3 shots before needing to reload. That is ruthless. It causes players to aim for hitting every bullet just to stay effective. Sure, some of his abilities are meant to compensate for having limited ammo rounds, but the fact of the matter is that you need to be incredibly accurate to play him well. In a fast-paced game like this, where the action is constantly moving and enemies barely ever stand still, that's a huge setback, especially when those shots don't even instantly kill. Winter Soldier's attacks aren't exactly his highlight reel either. He has a rush attack at close range for up-close combat, a long-range energy shot, and a grappling hook that pulls in enemies. Individually, these abilities are useful, but together, there's very little synergy. You've got mobility, burst, and gap closing tools that don't really flow into a clear playstyle. He's a jack of all trades, but master of none. His ultimate? It's decent and definitely a point in his favor, but it's not game-changing enough to justify the sheer mechanical skill required to get value out of the rest of his kit. Winter Soldier is flashy, but in the end, too harsh to be worth choosing over better, easier heroes. He takes more than he offers, and in a competitive shooter, that's just a bad bargain. Spider-Man is the kind of hero who looks great, until you start looking strategically. At first glance, he's a nightmare for Force players. He charges in, wreaks havoc, flies around the battlefield like a madman, and disappears before anyone can keep up. The more you play him though, the more you realize he's Flash, but not actually good at anything. His mobility is definitely among the greatest in the game. Web swinging allows for rapid dives, insane escapes, and flanks that are nigh impossible to predict. This renders Spider-Man a nagging thorn in the side, distracting, frustrating, and disrupting the enemy team at will. But that is also where his true utility stops. Spider-Man is unable to maintain pressure over extended fights. In close range, his movement deteriorates rapidly. And while he has up-close toys like his normal melee and amazing combo, he does not usually take advantage of close-range trades. It's as if the devs did not wish to permit him to truly be threatening for too long. He charges in, pokes a little, and has to fall back, or die. Worse yet, Spider-Man lacks a decent ultimate. He lives on short-term chaos and surprise tactics, but in organized games, like Ranked, this playstyle just doesn't cut it. If the enemy team is even slightly paying attention, he gets caught and annihilated before he can do anything meaningful. Spider-Man has lots of fun, but he's simply too reliant on catching out. When that doesn't work, and against decent players, it generally doesn't. He's little more than a pretentious annoyance with top-notch Parker skills. From a glance over, Venom's a terror of a guy to face on the battlefield. He's huge, hard to strike, and darn near unstoppable, as long as he's dashing about and doing a game of evade. His ability to survive hits and be all the worse for it only gives him that kind of sheen, which is enough that sometimes, looking past survivability, you wonder just how little real impact he truly does possess. Venom's great at sponging attention. He can bug the backline easily and last long enough to waste an opponent's time. There is a downside. He does absolutely nothing. Offensively, there's just no one there for him. He has terrible melee attacks, they're slow and unrewarding, and not having a thing in terms of range means it's hard to harass from beyond the safety zone, or to really do from anywhere in most cases. His kit is also very bare. You get in, flail around, try to get something off, and repeat the process. There isn't much combo potential or fun choice-making happening here. He's really just a distraction, not a threat, and that's a big problem when most heroes in Marvel Rivals are supposed to be both. And as for his ultimate, Beast of the Abyss, it sounds good on paper. This massive area denial ability that pulls in enemies sounds nasty, but in practice, it's pathetically easy to escape. Anyone with a working brain and a dash button can simply walk out of it. It's not the sort of reliability you need from an ultimate on a tank, and on a character who doesn't already do a lot of damage to start with. That's a deal breaker. Venom survives, but he is not a player. If all you bring to the team is not dying, then by all means, have him. But if you want to win, there are tanks that offer a lot more in pressure, usefulness, and actual danger. Captain America is supposed to be a high agility frontliner, a guy who goes in, interrupts, defends, and maybe finishes off priority objectives. And okay, he does some of those things, but not nearly good enough to be worth picking over other frontliners. His main asset is mobility and harassment. He can jump into the enemy's backline, throw punches, and create some noise. He's not bad at getting to healers or supports, but when he gets there, his damage just isn't high enough. The payoff for playing aggressively on Cap is very low. His numbers don't match his role, and he's more of a nuisance than an actual threat. Now onto his legendary shield. It takes 400 damage before it breaks, which sounds wonderful until you realize it doesn't absorb so nicely for the team unless they're standing behind him in perfect line. It's not a dome, it's not AoE, it's a directional. That makes you better off using it to block yourself, not the team, which is a little strange for a so-called protector. The shield will deflect projectiles, and yeah, it's cool. It'll even deflect ults like Iron Man's if you do it at the right time. But consider this. How often are you going to be doing that in the middle of chaos? Probably never. It's a special case mechanic with very low reliability, and it doesn't compensate for the low overall damage output or lack of crowd control. And let's be real, if you're looking for a shielding frontline guardian, Magneto and Doctor Strange has so much more to offer in terms of protection, support, and general team utility. Cap's build simply can't hold a candle in a game where burst damage, zoning, and crowd control rule. In the end, Steve Rogers is simply a jack of all trades that's mastered none. He's not intimidating, not tanky, not supportive enough, he's simply present. Let's be honest, a lot of people picked up Squirrel Girl expecting mayhem, humor, possibly even a bit of wasted potential. What they got instead was a character who's far more style than substance. Squirrel Girl's regular attacks does mediocre damage. Not bad, not good. Nothing on the level of the upper tier DPS characters like Loki, Iron Man, or even Gila. Her melee is crazed, but if you are not getting in close or catching people off guard, she's just flailing wildly while getting wiped out by ranged damage. Now, her squirrel blockade can potentially stun enemies, and on paper, that's great. Crowd control in a shooter is always welcome, but in practice, it's not consistent. It takes precise aim, it's got a weird hitbox, and even when it connects, there's never time to take advantage, unless the enemy is solo, which never occurs. So it's just this flashy thing that sometimes gains you time, but never swings the battle in your favor. And then, there's her ultimate. This could have been her salvation. A swarm of squirrels in tight spaces is cacophonous, disorienting, perfect for objective fights. But no, the AoE is small, the damage isn't lethal, and most enemies just run out of it or jump over it. For a character whose entire fantasy is death by 1,000 squirrels, this ult is a wet sneeze in a hurricane. In total, Squirrel Girl doesn't leave the impression that a good DPS character would. Her kit feels like a list of gimmicks that aren't tied together with enough power behind them. In a game defined by fast kills, high mobility, and utility energy, Squirrel Girl is relegated to being forgettable. Short of the developers remaking her ult or making her follow-up potential more worthwhile, she's just not the pick over more consistent sources of damage. Jeff is a lot of potential on paper. With his ultimate ability to engulf enemies and take up contested spaces, he's a one-trick pony in specific scenarios. That aside, his kit is undoubtedly niche and does not grant him the breadth of versatility needed to be a consistent figure on the battlefield. Let's talk about his healing. Jeff's normal attack is a healing wave of water, but it's nothing that will get your socks off. The problem here is that healing in Marvel Rivals takes speed, effectiveness, and simplicity. Jeff's healing is awkward to play, requiring precision, something which doesn't necessarily go along with the fast tempo of the game. He can heal, but at a slower pace than other dedicated support players like Moira in Overwatch or Mercy in Rivals. His bubbles both give extra healing and even speed, but again, the stealth on the field keeps teammates from being able to use these to their maximum potential. Now let's talk about his ultimate. The swallowing enemies thing sounds awesome in concept, especially for zone control, but Jeff is vulnerable while he's doing this action. Once he swallows an enemy, he's not invulnerable yet. That is, he can get promptly eliminated during the animation, so it's more of a high-risk play than a good game changer. He may certainly assist to bring point control, but in the process, he can become exposed if there is no protection or follow-up. Aside from his ultimate, Jeff is not so great. He does not much help the rest. His healing potential is weak, especially when other support characters are doing a better job of keeping teammates at the expense of less effort. As much as he can potentially disrupt with his ultimate, he does not have the substance otherwise, so as a whole, he does not do so well in an action-packed team game like Marvel Rivals. Scarlet Witch in Marvel Rivals is one such character that's designed to feel overwhelming early on. Auto-aiming spells makes her trivially easy to play, and she's often a high-level threat in the lower levels of play, since you don't really need much skill in order to do damage with her. But then there's this. As you start approaching the top levels, she starts to fall apart. Let's start with damage output. Scarlet Witch is able to do some solid numbers on paper, but here's the problem. She doesn't do enough damage to matter at high-level play. She has quick abilities, but they don't have the oomph that's required to make her a viable threat to the tankier or more dodge-heavy characters. And due to her auto-aiming, she's not really making those clever strategic shots. She's just spraying spammy damage and hoping she catches something. Then you have her abilities. Mystic Projection is a nice escape tool, letting her get out of harm's way quickly, which is great for not dying, but it's not something that's going to win you the game. It's a get-out-of-jail-free card at best, but it doesn't deal any actual offense. Dark Seal can stun enemies, but it's not for long enough to have much of an impact. You'll be lucky to land a follow-up kill after stunning an opponent, and that's assuming you're not interrupted in the meantime. Chitonian Burst sounds good on paper, with its area of effect damage, but the damage isn't enough to make enemies sweat. It's a tool for annoying annoying people rather than the one to actually secure kills. Her ultimate is a textbook case of looks good, doesn't do enough. It sounds good on paper, especially in organized team fights, but in practice, it's far too easy to dodge, and it isn't game-changing unless you're facing an uncoordinated enemy team that's out of position. Now, don't get me wrong, Scarlet Witch is easy to pick up and plays phenomenally when the stakes are low, but in competitive higher-level play, she's just not cutting it. Her damage isn't incredible, her stuns don't last long, and her ultimate is situational at best. At the end of the day, she's just not a true powerhouse. She requires synergy with other members to truly excel, and when left on her own, she's far too easy to pick off. Iron Fist is one character who performs great in 1v1 encounters and solo combats, hence he is perfect for dispatching squishy enemies. He has rapid and powerful attacks with ample attention to speed and accuracy. As long as he can approach enemies and throw out his combo punches, he will kill the enemy before even given the possibility of a counterattack. But where Iron Fist falls short is in team battles. His set of abilities is largely centered around dueling and has little to offer the team in the way of crowd control or lasting damage potential. He's vulnerable in big battles, as he doesn't possess equipment to aid him in protracted battles or when battling multiple opponents. This renders him highly situational and less valuable in coordination with groups. Iron Fist's greatest strength is mobility, which he uses to rapidly dash across the battlefield, dodge attacks, and get into the backline in a matter of seconds. But his reliance on positioning himself in the right place at the right time makes him a high-risk, high-reward sort of guy. When he is able to kill priority targets in the enemy team, he is a game saver, but when the battle is a team fight, he gets left behind. Essentially, Iron Fist excels at quick takedowns, but is a bad option for players who wish for a more balanced playstyle because he cannot support his teammates and is vulnerable to group fighting. He's great for players who wish to pick off targets at a distance, but not for players who wish to be the team player. Black Widow is also meant to be a long-range accurate and agile sniper, but she fails. Her long-range attacks are precise but lack the damage capability needed to instantly kill, compared to Hawkeye or Gila, who can kill by immense damage at a distance. This makes Black Widow useless for sniper roles. While Black Widow is mobile and can evade attacks, mobility alone cannot make her great. Other characters like Spider-Man and Iron Man make better use of mobility through enhanced offensive skills. Her melee skills, while being suitable for close combat, are misplaced, given her own role as a sniper. This incongruity detracts from her effectiveness in both ranged and close combat. Black Widow's last ability is also disappointing, failing to offer the game-changing impact that some ultimates offer. This makes her less reliable in high-pressure situations, especially in team fights where other heroes shine. In team fights, Black Widow doesn't make a significant impact. Her lack of burst damage and crowd control makes her not play as well as other heroes in these situations. Overall, Black Widow lacks the damage, utility, and presence that other heroes provide. While she is a promising character, she's eclipsed by better snipers and more utility-minded heroes. Storm in Marvel Rivals is somewhat disappointing relative to other heroes. She's a flight hero with incredible meteorology-based abilities, but her overall contribution to the game is low. Unlike other heroes, who can absolutely dominate in flight or on the ground, Storm's moveset doesn't have sufficient power that makes her dominate. Her normal attacks are slow, so she can be outmaneuvered easily, especially in 1v1. Her slow movement speed during midair also handicaps her to move quickly or dodge attacks effectively. As for her potential, Storm relies quite a bit on her ultimate ability to play effectively, but without it, her attacks simply don't feel like they're on par. She's not doing enough damage or versatile enough to be a real threat in combat. Her moves lack the impact that other characters' ultimates and moves have, and this is part of why she is less viable at high-level play. Although flying does give her some independent movement, it's not enough to counteract her weaknesses. She can't keep up with other fast characters who can travel and dish out more damage. Her flying also doesn't give her the advantage it would in other games, because she still needs to stay close to friends to be of any use. Overall, Storm's look is decent, but it's overbalanced to the point where she's useless in most situations. That she doesn't have good attacks and must rely on her ultimate makes her a hero who doesn't contribute much to the game in a fast-paced one such as Marvel Rivals. She doesn't do the job of an overpowered ranged or support hero, so she's not an easy choice for players who wish to affect combat. Black Panther in Marvel Rivals is generally one of the worst DPS heroes in the game. Although he's meant to be a quick and agile fighter, his design doesn't hold up in a competitive environment. Black Panther's focus on mobility and combos, which would otherwise be an asset, ends up being his greatest weakness, as it renders him very predictable and fragile. His mobility is restricted to easily countered and vertical wall climbs that don't provide the same level of dynamic movement as other characters. It leaves him predictable and vulnerable, especially when he doesn't receive a dash. The second he's locked into a movement, he's essentially a sitting duck for 8 seconds and is open to be hit. In terms of dishing out damage, Black Panther performs poorly. Even when he does hit his combo, he's left with very little HP, generally around 10 to 20 HP, making him an easy target for a counterattack. This is especially frustrating because his combos are so hard to hit and then give such disappointing payoffs off in terms of viability. He also struggles with sustain due to the constant healing that enemies can rely on. If the enemy is healed even a single time, Black Panther's pressure is completely cancelled, and he is left in a disadvantaged state. His M1 attack, a standard attack, is practically useless when not in combo chains, having very little utility in the midst of a battle. The last skill, Bast, is bugged and does not deliver what it advertises. Even when close to the enemy, it will barely hit any damage or miss entirely, which is very frustrating when trying to execute strategies with him. Overall, Black Panther is a character that underperforms in almost every aspect. His inability to apply constant pressure, his telegraphed movement, and his low viability makes him a lost pick. Playing Black Panther often feels like an immediate loss, since his kit is just not on the same tier of usability as the rest of the cast in the game. The Human Torch is also a character that doesn't live up to expectations, especially in competitive play. While he might be fun to play in quick play or casual matches, his flaws are evident when put up against better players. His worst weakness is his mobility. Unlike other air characters, the Human Torch flies extremely slowly. This turns him into a sitting duck, as he literally stands out like a sore, burning thumb and is hard to miss. Even with his shift move, which is meant to let him dodge, his slow movement makes it almost impossible for enemies to miss him no matter how much he flies around. His Wall of Fire and the E ability, which connects them to create a wall, are abilities that sound good on paper, but in practice are very easily countered. Individuals can simply move out of the area that the wall closes off, causing it to be useless in a majority of situations. The crowd control he provides isn't nearly enough to enable him to be effective, especially when his only role is to be a disruptor. As for crowd control, the Human Torch is even less of an asset. As a slow-flying target, he's highly vulnerable. Any half-decent player will take him out with ease when he tries to get into these confrontations. His primary fire is far too weak at range, and with his slow projectiles and broad spread, it's simply not useful against enemies at a distance. Now, you'd think the dive bomb skill would let him get up close and kill long-range attackers, but no such luck. The dive bomb skill leaves the Human Torch in a compromised position, with no way out after he commits to the dive. This makes him a sitting duck, because the dive bomb doesn't leave any genuine escape methods after committing to the attack. While his primary fire is more useful up close, the inability to manually cease flying makes him a constant floating target, which is undesirable in most situations. Being constantly vulnerable in the air makes him a sitting duck, and because he cannot counter his weaknesses, he simply cannot keep up in competitive play. Essentially, the Human Torch is a hybrid of Moon Knight and Storm, but inferior to both of them in nearly every way. His mobility is too sluggish, his damage is lackluster, and his crowd control abilities are far too simple to counter or avoid. He's a character who might have some niche usefulness in casual play, but he's outclassed by other heroes in virtually every way for competitive play.